Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My name is Correll. I'm Director of Product Management for AeroHive. Just to let you know, my networking days go back to coring thicknet cables at Cabletron. So I've been in this industry for a long, long time. Been in Wi-Fi for about the last 14 years or so. And today we can go really quick if you guys all agree that 2.4 is a wonderful spectrum. We all should use it. But I understand from some of you that you took a vow last year or the year before to never do 2.4 in your networks. It's kind of funny, when I started planning for this presentation, I called around to people I worked with, I called around with people I used to work with, I called around with people I know, and there's a lot of people that hate 2.4. I mean, absolutely hate it with a passion. You think I was saying, let's bring token ring back. I mean, looking at some of the stuff online and stuff, it's like, agreed, 2.4 must die. I mean, this is a little bit extreme because if you think about it, we're all going to die before 2.4 dies. It's not going anywhere. And the presentation was all about the rejuvenation of 2.4. And when I reached out to our chip manufacturers, I found out there isn't any problem with 2.4. The problem with it is with us. 2.4 is flowing off the assembly lines. 2.4 only chipsets because of IoT and other things. They were saying there's two new factories, low-end stuff coming out of China, that millions and millions of 2.4 only 11N chipsets going into the IoT space. So that market is definitely exploding. It's not going away. If you think you want to get rid of it, it just isn't going to happen. So there's nothing really you can do about it. And you got to understand that there's a lot of passion out there about the technology. I remember, 11 years ago when I was at Xeris, we were in a meeting once, and Xeris made these 16 radio arrays. Remember all that? And we were talking to one of the engineers. He goes, "Do we even need to support 2.4 anymore?" This was 11 years ago. And you think about how technology changed and what's going on in that environment. And then yesterday we had some interesting conversations, and I think the technical description was Wi-Fi sucks. I think that came up a couple of times in the morning. It doesn't. Wi-Fi 2.4 is fine. It's sometimes the deployment, the configuration, that functionality is a problem, but it's not going away anytime soon. It really, really isn't. Most of the problems we have that I see, and I guess most of you guys have seen too, is, let's just be honest, 2.4 isn't going away because 2.4 isn't a product. It's not a technology. It's not a protocol. It's a spectrum. It's a bunch of channels that are available. It's like saying, copper's going away. 10 years ago, that piece of copper could have been DSL, and then it became ADSL, and then it became, what's it now, G-rate or whatever. And the same thing with those 2.4 bands. I mean, what's wrong with 2.4? See, I'm going to make you guys work while you're here. What's wrong with the 2.4 band? Nothing. That's a good answer. But the best answer is it depends. But go ahead. Somebody back there said something? What do you mean it's full?
Everybody uses it. It's not enough channels.
Not enough channels. Well, how many channels is there? 3 or 4, right? Well, last time I checked, Uni 3 only had 4 channels. So should we get rid of that too? Uni 2 only has 4 channels. Should we get rid of that? I'm just having fun with you. But no, that's one of the things it had. It's not enough channels. Actually, it's got a lot. It's got 14 channels. Can't you use them all? Of course you can. Check the Wi-Fi in this hotel. They're all being used. Nothing wrong with that. One of the stories I always tell is, anybody ever been to I was at the Marriott Hotel in Honolulu 10 years ago. Anybody ever been there? None of you have ever been there, right? I'm going to ask you a tough question. What Wi-Fi channel are they using on the 8th floor? 8. This was many, many years ago, but we get in there and, that's the way people, it's nothing wrong with it. There's just a certain amount of ignorance associated with Wi-Fi, and I don't mean that negatively. I mean, there's a lot of people that do a lot of different things, and they're not Wi-Fi experts. So it's like, okay, I never used Wi-Fi before. I got a bunch of APs. I open the book. I read 2 pages. That's all I need. Got 11 channels. I got a 10-floor hotel. I'm good to go with a spare channel. And that's what people look at. And when you design it that way, you have lots and lots of problems. Most of you, if you've ever gone in after the fact and hey, the Wi-Fi stinks. Obviously, Peter was talking about yesterday, everybody. And you go in there and you look at it, and the first thing you think in your head, I don't need to fix this. I just need to turn off half the damn APs and the network will work fine. Or I'll put them on the right channels. And actually, it's kind of great because Peter's coming up after me and it goes, I love CCI, which is a perfect follow-on, I think, to 2.4. So it works good. That's one of the big problems out there is that it's configuration, it's how things were set up, how things were doing. And a lot of times there's too much RF in the environment. So what else is wrong with 2.4? We only got one thing, that there's not enough channels. Bluetooth. Oh, okay. Well, BLE gets a little bit better. They kind of stretch out the channels a little bit. And the new Bluetooth tries to avoid it as much as possible, but that's okay. Okay, it is a challenge because there's other things. There's Bluetooth, there's wireless phones, there's microwaves, there's a lot of stuff in the environment. But it all comes down to understand that we still really do have, 3 or 4 usable channels. And the fact that in 2.4, if you look at 5 gigahertz, they're already separated. They try to make it idiot-proof. You got 36, you got 40, you got 44, you can't put something on 37. Well, you got to work really hard to do that if you want. But in 2.4, obviously I can use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is if you don't know what you're doing is a bad thing. However, you guys are all smart, right? So you do know what you're doing. So you can use directional antennas and you can do channel reuse and you can be really smart and actually use more than 3 or 4 channels depending on the environment, depending on what you're trying to do. But that's what it's really all about. It's about really being smart about the technology and what's going on. So that being said, we can probably go to slide 2 now. Kind of take a step back a little bit about evolution. And by the way, if you guys didn't know, 802.11 is 20 years old. Back in June, it became 20 years old. So next year it can start to drink. It's amazing if you think about it, that how far that's come in just 20 years. Now, you guys are all smart Wi-Fi professionals and experts, right? What's Wi-Fi's, what's the older wireless technology? I'm going to give you guys a test question here, a quiz. What's the older wireless technology that Ethernet and Wi-Fi kind of developed out of? See how smart you guys are. Aloha Net, very good. What you win is a coupon for a free antenna. No, I just kind of wanted to mention that because, depending on how old you are, you might remember the old Aloha Net, and that's actually kind of where CSMA-CD and all that stuff came out of. But you kind of look back where Wi-Fi came from, and, back here in the day when some of us are old enough to remember this stuff, it was like 2.4. 2.4 is all you ever want to do. 5 gigahertz, it's too expensive, can't propagate far, can't get through walls, no devices support it, don't even bother with it. But then, coming along about this time, about 2007, a couple interesting things happened about there. This thing called an iPhone really came about, BYOD came about, 11N started to appear, and that's when it actually really exploded. That's when the 5 gigahertz space really, really took off. So here it was pretty much we're in a 2.4 land. Here we got into a 5 gigahertz, or a 2.4 and 5 gigahertz space. And then, 11AC came along and kind of stuck a knife in the back of 2.4. Because, a lot of people, and just to let you know that they're actually, if you talk to like Broadcom and Qualcomm and all this, they actually did use 11AC technology with 2.4 for some special use case and stuff. I mean, there was never an IEEE spec, there was never a Wi-Fi Alliance certification, but for some wireless ISPs and stuff like that, they did use some of that functionality. So it wasn't like it was against the law to do it, it's just nobody actually did it. But at this point, it kind of died out at that point. And people, this is where they started saying, 2.4 is dead, you got to go to 5 gigahertz, don't do it, take the swear test, never put a 2.4 network in. The problem is that, not necessarily Aerohive, but companies, when they sold you APs, what was in that AP? One 5 gigahertz and one 2.4. So we actually kind of created the problem in ourselves. I've got 3 2.4 channels, I got 24, 25, 5 gigahertz channels, but every AP I sell you is a 50-50 mix. So it kind of created that problem a little bit. But on the other hand, just because technology evolved, and this is the important thing to understand, one of the things I've been doing for a long time is when I come to Europe and come to England, when I go home, I stay at a hotel. I've stayed at the same hotel out by Terminal 4 a long, long time. I won't mention the name. But 10 years ago when I first stayed there, they were G only. And 8 years ago, they were G only. And 6 years ago, they were G only. And 4 years ago, G only. And 2 days ago, they were primarily G only as far as the network that they're running. They got some N now and stuff. But this is their network. And to be honest with you, they did a pretty good job as far as 1, 6, and 11 and all that stuff. And, to this day, they're primarily a 2.4 network and G only. And one of the things I want to tell you that's kind of a big secret and just really don't tell anybody, it works. We get hung up into this. You need wave 1, you need wave 2, you need to 11 AX and all that stuff. This works. I check in, I take my phone, I put it in voice Wi-Fi mode, T-Mobile works great and all that stuff. Mind you, I don't want to do a high density conference there in this type of environment, but for the most part it works. 2 years ago, I was in the hotel and I actually ran into the manager and I asked him about this. I said, you guys have been, 11G, you're, That's 1999 technology. You're behind the ball. And he goes, every so often, at least once a week, somebody comes up to me and brings that up. And he goes, the only people that bring that up? IT people. The regular people that come in and do their work and use the phone and do this, they never bring it up, he says. And if we got a lot of complaints on it, we would probably do something, because any of you guys who work in the hotel environment, obviously Wi-Fi is the biggest challenge out there. But it's like, why are they sticking with G? Why are they sticking with 2.4? We all know that it's no good, it's garbage, shouldn't use it, got to use something else, so why are they sticking with it? There could be lots of reasons they're sticking with it. First of all, they're not getting a lot of complaints. Second of all, it could be that how they set it up. Maybe they can't afford to put the APs in the rooms, so they put them in the hallways. Maybe they got concrete walls and they want to use 2.4 to propagate through the wall, and 5 gig won't do it. Maybe you only have 100 meg uplink for the broadband connection. So there's a lot of reasons on why they might do this that we get stuck up a lot of times in technical reasons. How much did this guy save over 10 years by not making the jump to A to N300 to N450 to AC Wave 1 to AC Wave 2? And maybe he'll just wait till AX comes along. Imagine that. I went from G and I waited to a really good 2.4 and AX came along. But there is no reason. It's important to understand that, there's a right way to do things, there's a wrong way to do things, and there's the best way to do things. And you guys have the toughest job in the world. Do you guys all know that? Do you guys all know that network engineers have the toughest job in the world? No joke. You only get to build half the network. Think about that. You only get to build half the network, and they can show up whatever they want. They could show up with devices that actually interfere with your network, and you can't do anything about it. They bring their own MiFi devices or pineapples or whatever they're doing. You only get to build half it. You build this beautiful, 11, AC Wave 2 screaming, and the guy shows up with B and G devices. What's it going to do for you? Nothing. So once again, it is a tough job, but that's an important thing to understand, the evolution of stuff. Well, now AX is coming along. It's going to solve all our problems. Wi-Fi will work perfectly. Nobody will make any mistakes again. It won't, because there's still going to be all this stuff down here. And that's the problem with Wi-Fi, is especially in public environments, people can bring whatever they want. And that's the biggest thing I want people to understand, because it's not that we're recovering 2.4 or we're bringing it back to life. Just to be 100% honest, we need to think differently about it. I was just like most people. A few years ago, 2.4, use it for the guest network, use it for something else, but put your production network on 5 gig and don't worry about the 2.4 because AC didn't do it, so it's going to go away. It's never going to go away. And it's actually a very good protocol. It really is. We used to do the interop back when really there was an interop. And the show floor was always an ugly, ugly place to try to do Wi-Fi. And eventually, gave up trying to do 2.4 gigahertz on the show floor. We would do a 5 gigahertz production network, and the show floor was a DMZ. Anybody can do whatever they want, and there'd be hundreds of channels out there, and replicated over and over again. And the funny thing about it? It still worked. You'd go out there and you'd open up a 2.4 device and you'd connect, and 80, 90% of the traffic on the network is retransmissions, corrupted, and everything else. But it is actually very reliable. It actually works at some point. So that's where it comes back to the 2.4 isn't going away. 2.4 is a usable spectrum. Take advantage of it. Kind of take a step back here a little bit and kind of look at some of the evolution in just 6, 7, 8 years. And you go online and you look at all these documents and say, 2010. Why everything wireless is 2.4. You live in a 2.4 gigahertz lifestyle. The IEEE agreed that 2.4 with wide channel selection, range, penetration, cost potential was the safest bet. This was 7 years ago. Definitely the way to go. A few years later, you go and you search all this type stuff, the death of the 2.4 is junk banned. Abandoned. Death to 2.4. As I said, it must die. It's not going to die. It's not a thing. It's some channels you can use. If you don't want to use them and you're in that environment, don't use them. But, this is kind of the whole thing there. It's time to abandon. Well, this is all when the AC was coming out at the same time. A few years later, well, it's not quite dead yet. It's still kind of usable. It's a long from dead. It's a headache that we have to deal with. Why it makes sense for IoT, which is really, really cool. We'll talk about that. Why we can't abandon it. It's kind of funny that a lot of the same people were saying this. So once again, you got to be careful what you write reports about, because your life might change in a very, very short period of time. The funny thing about it is that the last page is that a lot of the people doing this, these were vendors. These were vendors that were selling APs. And every AP they sold has a 5 gig and a 2.4. And they're saying to you, don't use 2.4, which means buy the AP, just turn the 2.4 off. Bad idea, you know? So the other thing I thought was neat is all that negative stuff. I came across this article just the other day doing searching. Why 802.11ac will kill the 5 gigahertz band. You know, people can write anything they want. And what this was all about is, well, you're only going to have one band anyway. You're only going to have one channel anyway. It's 160 megahertz wide. Come on, guys, be serious on that. So once again, you kind of have fun with all this stuff. But the important thing to understand is, and why I'm talking about this now, is because 11AC, once again, you looked at it and said, okay, we're really not supporting 2.4 anymore. 11AX will be supporting it. It's going to come out in the first release, at least to the people I talked about. It's going to have that functionality. We'll talk about it a little bit more. IoT is going to be huge because if you think about it, you're a product manager for an IoT company. You're going to make this little widget, some sensor or whatever. And what do you want to sell millions of these things. So what you're looking for is the lowest possible COGS, the cheapest price possible. What's the cheapest 2.4? I don't care about speed. I don't care. I'm not looking for, you know, a 3x3 device. I'm looking for a 1x1 or a 2x2 that'll give me a couple of hundred meg. You know, I'm looking for it cheap. I'm looking for a technology that's going to propagate because it's a residential use. I got to go through walls. You know, I'm looking for a device that is going to be low power. That's 2.4, and that's why we're seeing actually a lot of growth in the chip manufacturers for that technology. So once again, we talk about, you know, is 2.4 going to come back? 2.4 never left. You know, you look at this hotel, look at some of the other hotels, look at some of the others. It's just our thought process kind of was pushing it by the side. Part of this also is that Wi-Fi has changed. You know, if you're kind of a older person like me, you know, Wi-Fi 7-10 years ago was all about connectivity. It was 2.4 back then. It was just, I want to connect the users. I want to do stuff. Wi-Fi now is all about what it can do for you. Your infrastructure now is a foundation that you can put anything on top of. And once again, that's a reason that 2.4 isn't going to go away, because 2.4 has advantages over 5 gig. 5 gig has lots of advantages over 2.4, but they're both going to be useful. It's not one or the other. And obviously, the application focus is going to be anything. Users are going to be IT, IoT, and that's the biggest functionality out there. You know, you look at what IoT is all about, and I kind of talked about this, low cost, low power, long range. When you're talking about an IoT type device, nobody's talking 1024 QAM. Nobody's talking 3x3 or 4x4 or 8x8. They're saying, I need 50, 60 megabits. You know, I need to go through maybe one wall. And that's why that's going to continue to grow, like it or not. And once again, chip manufacturers are still making 2.4 only devices. As I said, when I was talking to our chip guy, who's saying that there's 2 brand new manufacturing facilities in China, and all they're kicking out is low-cost 2.4 chipsets. You know, which is going to be the bane of your existence in the future, because that's where they're going to come, because that's all they want. I want a chipset. I want to go long distance, and you know, how many people think about, you know, we talk about IoT, and I'm getting sick of that term, just like BYOD. But think about wearables. You know, think about, you know, in medical environment, think about your Apple phone, your watch phone. Think about all this stuff. Most of that stuff is going to be 2.4. A lot of the stuff is going to be 2.4, not because they want 2.4. Well, actually, it is because they do. It's because they want the propagation. They want it to go a little bit further. They want it to at least get to a wall. And that's what sensors are going to be for. That's what the other stuff. IoT also, a lot of these sensors are going to sleep a lot. They don't have to be on all the time. So I want low power. I want, you know, wake up every 30 minutes. And that's a neat thing that's available in AX now. It's called TWT, Target Wake Time, I think it is where you just tell it, hey, wake up, tell me the temperature, and go back to sleep for a half hour. You know, and that's what they want. They want it very inexpensive, very cheap, last a long, long time. You guys are quiet this morning. I thought I had more debate on 2.4. I guess I convinced you all that's a good thing. Raise your hand and say you'll only build 2.4 in the future.
It was never the way you described it was, I will never build 2.4 only again.
Why? There's got to be I don't know it right now, but it's got to be a valid reason for a 2.4 only environment. You know, maybe for security reasons. I'm going to just put a bunch of IoT sensors just on a 2.4 network, keep everybody, you know, that's not 2.4 only, that's a segmentized stuff. But yeah. I mean, I've built networks that are 5 gig only, but I don't think I've ever built anything that's 2.4 only. Can't think of it right. There's another hand back there. That's a fantastic idea. Everybody raise your hand now that has an 11H capable phone. Any more questions? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Zigbee, same thing. We're starting to see a lot of interest in Zigbee, but it's like, Wi-Fi is just prevalent. It's in everything. And will other things come along? Once again, it will propagate much, much further. It's great. It's a 900 megahertz band, whatever. Same thing with AD. AD is a great thing because it only goes a short distance, so I get channel reuse again. So there's value in all this stuff. And that's an important thing to understand. I tend to be up here talking about IoT, and I'm talking about Wi-Fi. IoT can do a dozen different wireless technologies, so there's a lot of other things out there. But 100% value, who just gets presents? And right now, Wi-Fi is it. Wi-Fi, it just happens to be the king right now. And will it last? I have no idea. Somebody else had a question. Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that 2.4 is so crowded nobody's using it anymore?
No. It's kind of funny because I could have made that exact same argument 8-9 years ago about 900 megahertz. That it was so crowded that people weren't going to use it, but then they moved into 2.4, so they opened up 900 a little bit. But yeah, why? Let's be serious. 2.4 is not a great spectrum to use, just because there's lots of other devices that operate in that spectrum. But don't throw it away. It's still 3 or 4 good channels that will fit in certain areas. They'll do certain things. We're kind of drifting off of here a little bit, but I'd love to see a world sometime where spectrum is used smarter, technology is used smarter. If I need to connect to you and you're way away, I'll connect on AH. And as you get it closer, maybe I'll adjust, and maybe I'll go to 2.4, and then maybe I'll go to 5 gig, and maybe go to AD. And that would be real software-defined radios, the ability to jump between technologies. Because I think that's the biggest issue we have right now. It's not we're running out of spectrum, it's just we don't use it wisely. Or we should use it better. Somebody else had a hand up. Okay, just kind of a little bit of review. Obviously 2.4, 20 megahertz wide. If you're a real nerd, you could say it's 22 megahertz wide. 14 channels, depending on where you are in the world, or 13 channels, or 11 channels. And that's an important thing too. We always talk about, I tend to live in the US world, and that's the whole world. And it isn't. We got 24 5 gigahertz channels, and we got 3 2.4, so what's the difference? You travel the world, there's some other places where you might only have 5 gigahertz channels. And telling them to get rid of 3 2.4, it's like, that's not going to happen. So once again, that's something you have to aware about. And once again, non-overlapping, everybody in this room knows what that means. But only like 1/2 of 1% of the networking world knows what that means. Is anybody listening in this hotel? Does anybody want to talk to the people in the hotel about that? And obviously, 11, actually that shouldn't say AC, that should say AX. AX will be backwards compatible. So when the new chipsets come out, there'll be AX, there'll be AN, there'll be G, and they even got to support B just because of where they want to go. Most people will turn it off. But we'll all be backwards compatible there. I don't have to talk about this. Hopefully you guys are fully familiar with that, the noise, the channel, the issues we have in this area. But let's look at some positives. Let's look at some negatives. Propagation, good. Goes a long way. And also a higher data rate is sustained for a longer distance. Mind you, I start with a lower data rate to begin with, but it's extend out a little bit further. Good penetration, typically you did a lot of surveys. 2.4 would kind of get through 2 concrete walls, where 5 gig might just make it through 1. It all depends on your wall, all depends what you're doing. Higher data rates propagate further, I said. And this is a key point too. Once again, you're that product manager for an IoT widget. I want to sell it in every corner of the world. And I know in every corner of the world, 2.4 is going to be available. So that's kind of a safe bet there. Huge install base out there. I don't know what numbers. It's like, Gartner and Cisco are saying, by 2020 we'll have 21 billion Wi-Fi devices on Earth or whatever. Half of them are 2.4. That's just the way the world is right now. Available channels are limited. Got it. But it's still 3 good channels. Data rates are lower. In an IoT world, who cares? And once again, we get carried away in there. We're talking about 11AX, 10 gigabits per second, 8x8, 1024 QAM. Yeah, that'll probably get you that far. So let's just be serious about these data rates. Has anybody done multi-user MIMO lately? Anyone find some clients that support that? There's a lot of good stuff that happens in the lab. But, data rates are lower. Great. 11N, I can only do 300 megabits per second to my phone. Does anybody really care? I mean, it's pretty much as far as it is. Interference higher, capacity lower. I mean, those are the big challenges in that environment. 5 gigahertz space, once again, not going to go into this. You guys should be experts on this. Obviously, DFS creates some challenges in that environment. Spectrum we got. Trying to actually get some new bands, probably not in my lifetime, but we've been trying with the FCC for a little while to pick up some more bandwidth here and some more bandwidth there. If anybody here is familiar, if this has moved at all further, I understand we got a new member on the FCC chair, and she tends to be more Wi-Fi friendly, and maybe this will get moving within the next decade or so, but probably not anytime soon. 5 gigahertz, obviously, I don't have to tell you, 5 gigahertz is a better channel. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But don't forget the others. Propagation, RF penetration. You need more access points. This is an old marketing stuff I remember from a long, long time ago. I put it up there just for fun. I don't necessarily agree with it. It all depends on your design and what you're trying to accomplish. But that's kind of one of the things that we're seeing out there. AX, what's AX going to do? The biggest thing AX is going to do is it's going to say it supports 2.4, which is going to give people a warmer feeling about it, since it's going to be there. Backwards compatible to the old technology, TWT, target wake-up time. There's been ways to do that before, but this is going to be where the client can negotiate with the access point for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it happens to be that, hey, wake me up in a while. I'll send you the information I have, and then I'm going to go back to sleep. Obviously, that's really, really important in IoT, really, really important in IoT battery-based devices, because they can last. It's kind of like, Ekahau tokens and stuff like that. Some of that stuff could last for years, and that's what you want. You want to just forget about it as much as possible. And you guys familiar with the sub-channel approach that they're taking with 11X, AX rather? Is that, obviously we all know about multi-user MIMO and all that stuff, but the idea is that, OFDM is broken down into all these individual sub-channels. Well, what they have with AX now is OFDM-A, which is the ability is now I can take, instead of just breaking it off into spatial streams, I can just break off sub-channels. Which is kind of interesting is if you're as old as me and remember when we transitioned from Ethernet hubs to Ethernet switching. I'm not quite saying we're at Wi-Fi switching at this point yet, but you're getting to the point that you're further dividing and separating traffic. And that's the coolest part, I think. That's one of the really neat parts about AX is it's not that I'm just going to give you a ton of bandwidth that you can share with everybody else. I'm going to give you 10 gig that you can share. If I can give you a dedicated 60 megabits per second over Wi-Fi that you're not competing with anybody else, that's fantastic. I mean, that's what Ethernet did 20 years ago when it broke it all out. And if Wi-Fi can actually get to this point, you start having APs that I can talk to not just 2 devices, not just 3 devices, but lots of different devices at the same time, that's really cool. That's when you're starting to get away from an AP that acts like a hub to an AP that acts more like a switch. And obviously now you got to go both directions and all that other stuff. But this is also, when I was talking to the guys, the chip guys, they say this functionality is also going to help with interference in the 2.4 band. Couldn't get a straight answer exactly how that's going to do, but it's going to help clean that up a little bit too. And once again, it's one of those things that you're probably not going to see much till middle of next year. As far as probably maybe the end of this year, you might see some residential type stuff start coming out, but it's probably middle of next year before you start seeing quantities, unless you guys got any inside information that I don't know of. So how do we fix this? What caused all this? One of the problems, and I mentioned this earlier, is we say that we've got all these problems with co-channel interference and adjacent channel interference in the 2.4 band, but we cause this. By we, I mean industry vendors, by selling APs that were a 50-50 mix forever. I mean, that's what it is. I was just talking to a guy about 6 months ago. They just sold a stadium, and they were deploying 850 access points in this stadium. And I said, well, what are you going to do with all the 2.4? You just turn most of them off. So you pay for this, but you're going to turn the functionality off. So what's happening now, and this is the only slide that's actually got an AeroHive picture on it. I'm not doing AeroHive. It's that you've got about 4 vendors right now that actually have software-defined radios, multi-state access points, whatever you want to call it. That typically what you're going to have is you're going to have one AP, one radio that's fixed in 5 gig, and the other radio that's a 2.4 or 5. And had we done that 10 years ago, I mean, it would have been more expensive and all that stuff, we probably wouldn't have had all the problems with 2.4 that we do today. That if I was able to go in there and I was able to say, okay, I'm going to say 80% of my clients are 5 gig. I'm going to set up 80% of my radios as 5 gig and 20% as 2.4. And you're also seeing smarter stuff where the access point will come up and look at the environment and say, I got enough 2.4 out here already. I'm putting both my radios in 5 gig. So once again, it's software-defined radios, multi-state radios, whatever you want to do it. And it is, because you get more bandwidth, you get better performance, you get more efficiency because you're not turning radios off and you're not interfering with it. And obviously, it maximizes your investment. I mean, who, as an end user, as a buyer, who wants to buy a bunch of APs and then the vendor says, well, you got to turn a bunch of them radios off. And it's like, well, why did I pay for it? You know, I want more discount. I want to start 50 off and then go to discounts. And so that's kind of an important part out there. So the bottom line here is Wi-Fi infrastructure, the 2.4, 5 gigahertz, it's just infrastructure, it's just spectrum. Take advantage of it. It's not going away. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. But be aware it's going to be there long after we're gone. So find a way to use it. Be smart. You guys are the pros, right? So that's what you get big bucks for. So figure out how to use the spectrum and do it smarter. IoT. You know, in Wi-Fi for the last 10 years, it's bigger, better, faster. IoT is like, I don't care. I just want to connect. I got the cheapest box here. I got the cheapest 2.4 chipset. It has the lowest power draw. And I'm just trying to reach out to 50 or 100 feet or whatever and transfer a couple of kilobits worth of data. And that's all it's looking at. It's nothing, anything more than that was going to do it. And then understand 2.4 and design accordingly. I mean, we talk, I forget, the gentleman yesterday was talking about the home lab. Play around with the RF too. You know, it's not just routing and all that. Play around. If you got any friends that got stores or stuff like that or warehouses, go set it up, see what happens, see what that works in that environment. Because that's the best thing for it. That's my presentation. You guys learn anything? You guys agree with me now that 2.4 is the way to go forward? Oh yeah. See, I'm giving you guys some time back for the first time ever.
That's great. Appreciate it. Questions? 2.4 is not dead.